Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Brothers Discuss. I am Alex,
And I am Chris.
and we are continuing our MCU marathon discussion, and we've made it to Thor, the fourth movie of the MCU. And yeah, what do you think of this movie looking back on it?
Um, well, looking back on, I don't remember too much when I saw this in theaters. I remember it was late. It was 3D. And
Oh, okay.
yeah.
See, I
Um,
do remember, and yeah, we had to go to a 3D screening for this, and which pissed me off because I do not like 3D. I'm so glad that 3D is not really a thing anymore.
mm,
But the problem with the 3D for Thor is that the 3D was piss awful. It was dark and there was like nothing popped out in the film that was like a cool 3D shot. They do have one shot like that where Thor, all they had to do is just have the hammer go right to the camera. And they have a shot like that, but the problem was it's so dark.
yeah.
So that's that so that movie was actually the movie that made me just realize that I do not care for 3D. I was
Mm.
done with 3D and I wanted to avoid 3D like the plague for the rest of my life. But yeah, as for the movie itself, what do you think of it?
Well, well, for starters, I was only 7 years old when this movie came out. So
Yeah.
this wasn't like the most exciting Marvel movie for me at the time, but I was only 7 years old. I didn't know better.
Hmm.
Looking back on it now, this is definitely one of the most underrated movies in the franchise for me.
Hmm.
It's not perfect. It does have fair share of problems, but a lot of people, a lot of fans, like say this and Dark World, they're like close to, if not at the bottom of like most MCU rankings. Um, and I actually like this one a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I think this is a pretty good movie. It's actually kind of a funny movie in a lot of ways. It's partly the
Mhm.
reason why I do like the movie quite a bit. Um, and I forgot how cool Asgard looked in this first movie, and
Mm.
I like the I like the architecture of Asgard quite a bit. It looks gorgeous, and I like the costuming as well. Though I
Mhm.
do wish Thor kept his helmet for the other movies, but and it's just one of those funny things as well is that whenever like off the top of my head with Spider-Man: Homecoming, where you have those robbers dressed up as Avengers, you have a guy wear a Thor mask, but the mask has the helmet. It's like, well, Thor
Yeah.
never actually wore his helmet on Earth. Um, it's weird.
It's just something I always think about. I mean, I'm sure like someone picked it up eventually, but like whenever Thor, whenever we get to another movie with Thor, like when we get to Avengers, I'm still thinking, oh, that helmet's still just sitting there in the throne room. No one's picked it up yet.
No. Um, and I think something I do like about this first Thor movie is the direction by Kenneth Branagh.
Hmm.
Um, a part of me, as much as I love Thor Ragnarok, as much as I think that's the best Thor movie, frankly, one of the best MCU movies in my opinion. I love Thor Ragnarok to death. A part of me wishes Kenneth Branagh stayed on for the entire Thor franchise.
Yeah.
He brings a certain energy to the archaic sounding dialogue to make it really work.
Oh yeah.
And I think I always found his Shakespearean background a good fit for the Norse god of thunder, and
Yeah.
it
Uh,
beautifully captures the struggles Thor goes through.
hmm. Yeah, I completely
Um,
agree with that.
yeah, and I think there's really good direction, and I actually don't even mind the odd Dutch angles everywhere.
Oh, I don't either.
Yeah, and yeah, let's talk characters, I guess. So Thor, the title character, his arc is simple, but it's also really effective, I think, and makes sense for who he is as a character.
Exactly. Um, it's the fish out of water scenario, but I think it works perfectly for him. Like when you get to see how he is, how he behaves in the first 20 minutes of the movie. He's very reckless, but his heart is in the right place for Asgard. But he never really learns humility, and so
Mm-hmm.
he's got a very nice arc when he gets to Earth, and it's fun, it's funny, but it's very heart-filled, and I do love that a lot.
Yeah, and I think the cast is terrific. I think
Yes.
Chris Hemsworth giving a solid performance of this god needing to be a better person, and I think the family dynamic between him, Loki, and Odin is just really great. Not so much Frigga in this movie, or even in the sequel necessarily, but funnily enough, it comes around in Endgame, where I think that's where Frigga really shines, in my opinion. Rene Russo.
I thought Frigga was always all right in Dark World. I thought she was pretty good in there.
Yeah, she's fine in Dark
I
World,
don't.
but
She didn't really do much in this one. Um,
I think the notable thing she does in the Dark World, I mean, not to really jump too much ahead in Dark World, is she dies and she has that good scene with Loki. Um, but
mhm.
yeah, I think that in the first two Thor movies, she doesn't really do a whole lot. But it's really an Endgame where I think she really shines.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, yeah. As for the others, Anthony Hopkins as Odin is just tremendous, tremendous casting, and Tom Hiddleston's Loki. Like, what more could be said about him?
Oh
Loki's
yeah,
great. And this is
he's.
my favorite Loki appearance in the MCU. I really, really love Loki
I
in this movie.
Oh, it's a toss up between this or Dark World for me because I really really do love Loki in Dark World. He's
I do too.
definitely one of the standouts of that movie.
That's the thing. Loki is
But I
just a.
think go ahead.
I was just gonna say. I think Loki's just a. Overall, I think he's a very consistent character. Like he's always.
Mhm.
I always really like him in everything he's in. Um,
And now he's getting
but
his own show.
yeah. So, but yeah, what were you gonna say?
Um, oh crap, what was I gonna say?
Oh no.
Oh, I think it's just between this and Avengers, like which one do I prefer? Him being a villain, I definitely say this. Because you really can't help but feel bad for the guy, because you could honestly argue that Odin is kind of the main villain of all the Thor movies. He
In a
is,
way, yeah.
in a way, yeah. He messes up a lot of stuff.
Hmm. Yeah. But no, I think Tom Hiddleston is just really, really good in this. And I think,
Hmm.
but I think for me, I think a lot of people will praise Tom Hiddleston, deservedly so, for this film. But I think the true rising star to come for it, because both Chris Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston were relatively unknown actors at this point. Prior to this, Chris Hemsworth was really, really good in J.J. Abrams' Star Trek movie, where he played Kirk's father.
Oh yeah.
And before that, he was doing all sorts of work in Australia. He was on Home and Away. But to see an actor like him, rise the ranks as quickly as he did and get to a place where he does all these things now, it's just great. I love seeing whatever Chris Hemsworth does. I think he's just a tremendous dude.
Oh yeah. Very
And he's just,
energetic, a lot of
yeah, and he's
fun.
he's very good in this movie, actually. And to pull off a modernized Shakespearean dialogue, but also making it comedic, I think is a really difficult role to pull off. But I think he does it tremendously.
Hmm.
Um, so anything else on Asgard you want to talk about notably?
You've pretty much said it all. I mean, I love Asgard's design in all three of the movies, actually. But
Mhm.
it definitely shines really bright in this one. Um,
Yeah.
it looks beautiful, even yeah. There's nothing else I can really say. It just looks gorgeous, considering it's all CG. It still holds up to
Mhm.
this day.
Yeah. And I mean, I like the other characters, like the Warriors 3 plus Sif.
Hmm.
Those are fun characters. But then we get to the Earth stuff. And I would say, how do I put this? I think it's my least favorite section of the film. I mean, it does have the funniest parts of the movie, but sometimes the comedy for me is hit or miss for me. I think anything
I
that Chris Hemsworth does, I think is just gold.
Right, I was about to say that. It's like
I
whenever
think
everything on Earth that deals with Chris Hemsworth's comedy, it works. And then when we cut to something like Darcy,
I
I
think
don't know.
everything Darcy does in this movie, and I'll go on record to say right now, I did not like Darcy for the longest time. Between this and Thor: The Dark World, she was my least favorite character of not just these movies, but for the entire MCU. I really do not like Darcy. But that changed
Yeah.
by the time we got to
Oh
WandaVision.
yeah, yeah. She's
Yeah,
much,
she's
much
much
better in
better.
there.
Yeah, she's much better in WandaVision. But yeah, she is the weak point in these first two Thor movies for me. I think anything she does or says is just not good. Like I don't like the Mimia line.
Oh yeah.
I've never found that funny. Not even
Um
in Thor: The Dark World where that comes back. It's like, ugh.
yeah, and that's kind of like anything that I didn't like about the humans in this movie, I didn't like even more in Dark World. Like they kind of share the same problems, these two movies. But it's
Yeah.
like Dark World is kind of amplified a little bit more. I find the human stuff a lot more annoying in Dark World.
And what's
Uh,
funny is that there's a lot more Asgard stuff in the Dark World
hmm
than in this movie,
Yeah.
which I like.
hmm
But the Earth stuff is once again what brings it down for me.
Yeah.
But as
Um,
for the first Thor movie, yeah, there's just not a ton of Asgard in this movie, but I'm kind of okay with that. I
for
like,
for Thor's arc in this movie, it does work for that. It is mainly supposed to be on Earth. It's supposed to be his journey on there. Um, yeah.
yeah, I think it's the mid section of the film set in this small town in New Mexico is what brings it down overall. You know, aside from the awesome compound raid scene, it's mostly low energy comedy that feels at odds with the potential that this premise holds.
And
But I think as soon as Thor sacrifices himself to the Destroyer, I think it gets really good again.
yeah.
I think this would be I think it would be a great comic movie if it had a little more Asgard and a lot less of Kat Dennings, in my opinion.
We are skipping over one of the greatest Stanley cameos in the MCU, though.
Oh my God, yeah, I love Stanley's cameo in this movie. This is a good cameo.
Yeah.
And you pointed this out as well when we were rewatching this at your house. Is that you see Stanley's truck again later on in the background in the diner scene.
It's very brief and it's really easy to miss, but it is there.
I've
Um,
never noticed that before until you brought that up, and I think that's so funny.
that's such an awesome touch.
um, yeah, and I guess speaking of cameos, I mean, we get some other people that show up. I mean, notably, we have J. Michael Cerzinski, a comic book writer, have a cameo. He was the guy that discovers Thor's hammer. He, of course, apart from writing one of my personal favorite Amazing Spider-Man runs, and my least favorite Amazing Spider-Man runs of all time, I should say, he also did a run on Thor, which I personally have never read before, but I've been itching to give that a read.
Mm.
So that's cool. But we also get our introduction to Hawkeye, Jeremy Renner.
He doesn't do anything.
Yeah, he really doesn't. He's just there. I don't know how I feel about Hawkeye's role in this movie now that I think about it, because he really doesn't do anything.
I have no idea like what went on behind the scenes in throwing Hawkeye. If I had to guess, that sounds like something that happened in post because all of the shots
Yeah.
are just on him. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
no,
Yeah,
point of view shots where like he looks down at Thor or anything. It's always just on him. So
he
I
never
think
really he's never in the same like frame as any other characters. I mean, he talks to
yeah.
Coulson, but I'm gonna assume, like you're saying, I think that was a pickup as well.
hmm
All the Coulson stuff.
Yeah. Well, Coulson actually gets to do a lot in this movie compared to
Oh, he does.
yeah, compared to the last two movies he was in.
That's right. Yeah. But of course, I think Coulson truly shines with the Avengers,
Oh yes.
and then which we'll get to. But then we don't even talk about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So we're just I'll just go and say right now, I do not like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. at all. I tried getting into it. I watched the first 2 seasons in its entirety, and I stopped after that.
I went on a little further. I watched the first few episodes of season 3, and then I stopped watching it. And I don't know what's been happening in the more recent seasons, but
I think
sounds
it's done
really
now.
chaotic. It sounds so chaotic.
Yeah, like there was a point where I think Coulson was ghostwriter.
Yeah.
And they had like Inhuman stuff.
They went back in time.
Oh, did they?
I think that was like the whole premise of the most recent season, is that they all went.
Was
back
it like
in
an
time.
Endgame tie-in or something?
I don't know. I don't think so, because they went back to like the 1920s, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I do not like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I'm sorry if you do, but I do not like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. That is a terrible, terrible show.
Mm.
I don't like it one bit. And the worst part about it, I mean, I'm sure I'll bring this up again when we talk Avengers, but the worst part about it for me is the fact that, they brought Coulson back, which I think it robs a lot from the first Avengers movie.
I do love Clark Gregg as Coulson, and I think like bringing him back, I can't believe I'm going to say this. I'm going to actually praise Captain Marvel for a second. Considering that movie is, it's a prequel of sorts. It's set for all these years. I'm fine if you bring him back for that, but I don't want him resurrected like they did with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. because that ruined, like, that was the motivating factor in the Avengers. That's what pushed the Avengers for getting the job done, and it's so stupid. But
and to have him just come back from surgeries, like that's so lame.
He got impaled. That's not something you can walk away from.
And I guess we're going to talk about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. right now because I don't see us dedicating an entire episode to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
No.
But for me, I think when I remember when I was watching it back in when it started in 2013. Yeah, 2013 is when it first started. I was thinking for the longest time that he was going to be this universe's version of Vision. I thought he was going to be a robot the whole time in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. because there were like lots of little clues I remember where there were lines like, "Oh, you're getting a little rusty," and he has this like automatic response whenever they bring up what is it Tahiti. He just says it's a magical place.
Yeah.
He just had this like almost like robotic response every time he said that. And I thought they were really pushing towards that theory that he was going to be like, not even necessarily a Vision, but I thought like a robot.
Yeah.
Or something.
Thank God.
But then no, they just did the lazy, most unimaginative way. They just did surgeries on him.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm glad that wasn't the case because I really, really love this version of Vision. And then
I do too.
Yeah. So.
But anyways, back to Thor. I love going on tangents. It extends the discussion. But
when else are we going to talk about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
We're not gonna. I mean, we'll probably bring it up again when we talk about Avengers, maybe Winter Soldier, because I do remember
that's
when
right.
They did the tie-in with the season 1 finale where Hydra is revealed to have infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D.
And I can picture all the writers on the show just wanting to kill themselves.
Yeah,
right there. They had to rewrite the entire thing.
And not to jump ahead with our Winter Soldier discussion, but I remember like the second we got out of the theater for Winter Soldier, my first thought was Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is fucked. What are they going to do next?
Oh, man.
And those tie-in episodes of Winter Soldier were just the worst.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone was just yelling at each other. I mean, there was one interesting part that I will admit was interesting is like He's like, we gotta get Nick Fury. He's like, well, Nick Fury is dead. It's like, oh, okay. So like to the rest of the world, Nick Fury was dead, but then at the same time is that he was running around in Age of Ultron with a whole helicarrier.
Well, he shows up in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. though, like during the
He
Winter Soldier time
does.
stuff. Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah, I was led to believe with like Winter Soldier that Nick Fury was presumed dead to the rest of the world, but except for the good guys essentially.
yeah,
But then now that's a little unclear to me. I don't know. I have to think about that.
yeah.
But anyways, back to Thor now. To transition back to Thor, all right, we have to take. Here's a drinking game. Anytime we bring up Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., like, take a shot. Like we're not gonna do a whole episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I don't want to do a whole discussion of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I don't have the energy to
No,
because I haven't even watched the whole show. I don't want
exactly.
to.
Because there's like 7 seasons, and I've only watched
There's
2, so I
exactly.
don't want to.
I don't care. There will never be a discussion on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. There may be one on Agent Carter season 1, maybe. But definitely Daredevil. We'll talk Daredevil for sure.
I still need to finish that. I've only watched the first
You
season
haven't
of
finished Daredevil?
No, I still have season 2 and 3 to go.
Oh my goodness. You gotta watch
Yeah.
those two. And you have to watch the first season of Jessica Jones. You don't have to watch anything else. Watch the first season of Punisher. And that's really it for the Netflix stuff.
No Defenders, no Iron
Defenders
Fist.
is Defenders is okay. Same with Luke Cage. Iron Fist is garbage. And anything else is just not terrible, but just not great either.
I think that is anything else.
Yeah, and I guess, and I haven't even seen the Inhumans show, and I
Neither
think
have
that's on
I.
Disney Plus though. I
I don't
think,
know.
and
I
there's
don't
also the Hulu. I think it was Cloak and Dagger.
Runaways.
They did Runaways, and I don't know where Cloak and Dagger is, but I think that somehow fits into the MCU in some capacity. I've not seen those shows
See,
either.
I don't. While we're talking about this, it's
Yeah,
the shows are really complicated because I mean, I don't think they're part of the MCU.
they're loosely part of it. I mean, they
They're
make
they're
connections to the
loosely
movies,
part.
but the problem is that the movies don't really acknowledge them. But I think that
Yeah,
will hopefully change because I mean, in Endgame, we did get the original Jarvis, the
yeah. You
actual
got Jarvis,
butler
which
from
so
Agent
far,
Carter.
so far, I think that's the only time a character that originated from a show made it into a movie.
Yeah, and I mean, if the rumors for Spider-Man No Way Home are true, we'll get Charlie Cox as Daredevil, which will bring me immense joy. That's the one. It's a
It'll
problem when the one thing you're looking forward to in the MCU Spider movie is Daredevil. That you've got a
it's
problem there.
it's funny. It's funny because it's like it'll bring you so much joy, but it's just gonna keep piling on to the mess that that movie is creating. Uh,
Yeah, and like I
let's
was saying for the longest time, like don't do a multiverse Spider-Man movie. Give Tom Holland a chance. Why don't you?
Here's the thing. All right, I know we're supposed to be talking about Thor, but right now in our world, we just got some news that like Doc Ock, it's gonna pick off right where his character left off, drowning in a river,
He's
and
dead,
and
and
a
he's
lot of
it's
people are
gonna
concerned. It's like it's gonna ruin his arc in that movie.
because the impression that I got from the casting of Alfred Molina and Jamie Foxx is that they're playing like the MCU versions of those characters, similar to what J.K. Simmons did in
Right.
Far From Home. Yeah, because they were saying Jamie Foxx was not going to be blue this time around.
Mm-hmm. Which I have
So I
my
was thinking,
doubts on
okay,
now.
yeah, we'll see. Because now they also confirmed with the Alfred Molina interview that just got published a few days ago is that like they're going to digitally de-age him to make him look like how he did in 2004 because he's aged quite a bit since then, and I mean, no disrespect to Alfred Molina whatsoever. I mean, he kind of gained some weight.
Mm.
Um, so, but they're deliberately making it so that he looks the part from 2004, and I don't like that one bit.
So
Uh,
yeah, it's gonna be a mess.
it will be a huge mess, but my only hope is that they do bring in Charlie Cox as Daredevil just to validate the Netflix shows.
If you have that, and if you have Charlie Cox and Toby meeting like their characters, then
Yeah,
there you go. I'll call it the best MCU Spider-Man movie right away,
sure. But then
even if it is the most messiest one.
it is going to be a mess. Um, but yeah, but as for, the other TV shows, I mean, I guess the Disney Plus shows, I think, are sort of in a different ballpark from everything else.
Oh yeah,
I think it helps with the fact that they are bringing in actual movie characters, and giving them their own stuff. Like,
right.
with what they're doing, like, it would not surprise me one bit if if money and budget weren't an issue. I could have easily imagined like Doctor Strange making a cameo in one of these shows or something like that.
Yeah,
Because I think they're just of that higher quality, in my opinion. That's nothing to take away from anything that the Netflix shows did or anything like that.
right.
But there's a real legitimacy to the Disney Plus shows. And I think it's the fact that I think you have Kevin Feige producing them as well.
Mm-hmm.
That I think that helps tremendously.
Right.
Now back to Thor.
Yeah,
Officially,
Thor.
I think I have nothing else to say about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. sucks. We're gonna move on from that. But back to Thor. I think if there's one thing I want to mention about Thor before we wrap this up is I want to talk about the score by Patrick Doyle. Because I think the score in this movie is awesome.
Oh,
and not a lot of people talk about it, but it's got one of the best themes in the MCU for me. I really like the score in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
But
And
I actually,
I'm being honest, for the Thor movies, my least favorite score is actually Ragnarok.
Same, actually, yeah.
I think it's fine for what it is, but like I thought Brian Tyler also did a great job with Dark World. I love his theme in there, and I love Thor's theme in here. Yeah.
And it's great because that theme in the first Thor movie comes back in Ragnarok. They do bring that back. And, I guess if I could mention the Ragnarok score, I do like Alexander Desplat's score. I think he's a great composer. But I think my favorite parts of the score are the more, synth heavy bits of the soundtrack. I think anywhere on what's the planet called?
Sakaar.
They go. What's that?
Sakaar.
Sakaar. Yes, that's the name. I think anything on Sakaar is just awesome stuff. I love the score there. It's good throughout, but I think of the three, it's actually my least favorite, even though Thor Ragnarok is my favorite Thor movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, Patrick Doyle's score in this movie, really good stuff. Even though there is a track that is a direct ripoff from Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen soundtrack.
I've heard about this.
Yes, so it's actually
it goes
during
it's
during Straczynski's cameo. Sad scene. I forget what the track is called in Thor, but let me look up the Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen soundtrack real quick because I want to point out the exact track that it's ripped off of. Like, it is a blatant ripoff. I'm not saying it was like an accidental like thing or anything like that. It is the score. It's got the same phrasing and everything. If I see the track name, I should be able to. Einstein's Wrong. That's the track name in Revenge of the Fallen. It's track 2 on the album for those that are curious. And yeah, and I once again I forget what the track is in the first Thor movie, where it's the ripoff. But for Transformers, the track is called Einstein's Wrong. That's the original piece that was ripped off in Thor.
Oh man.
Yeah, you want to talk about the post-credit scene for Thor? Or actually, no. Before we do that, let's talk about Jane Foster, Natalie Portman. This is actually a very interesting casting choice, in my opinion. Natalie Portman, because she's a tremendous actress, and seeing her in these movies is, I've always had sort of mixed feelings on, because I think she's actually really good in this movie. And I actually, contrary to what some people may say about the romance in this film, I actually quite like the romance in this movie.
Yeah.
Um, I think ultimately it does get ruined in the sequel. I think the relationship is just really annoying in the Dark World.
Because you have a
But I
really
think it,
weird and unnecessary love triangle.
yeah, the love triangle stuff is a little interesting to me, but I think it ultimately comes down to Jane Foster herself as just not very good in that movie. She's just
Mm,
really, not to jump ahead to the Dark World, but she's mainly just a plot device
yeah.
in that movie. But in this movie, I actually quite like the relationship between her and Thor. There's something very charming about it.
Hmm.
And it's actually kind of sad when Thor ultimately destroys the Bifrost.
Yeah.
And yeah, it leaves that at it's funny because at the time I had no idea how Thor was going to get back to Earth for the Avengers. And they do explain it in a very quick way. But I was under the impression that at first that once he destroyed the Rainbow Bridge, that there was no repairing it. But evidently there was a way, I guess, and it's back to normal eventually. Okay.
um,
uh,
yeah, I
anything?
think she's
Yeah.
pretty good in this movie. And I agree with you. I do like her a lot more in this than Dark World. And I'm actually pretty excited because she will be coming back in Thor: Love and Thunder.
Which I was
Um,
not expecting because she had some. She would talk. I think she talked about like her having not having a good experience on the Dark World. I think she's had some things to say.
yeah.
It's one of those instances where an MCU actor has been a little vocal about the MCU, their
Hmm.
experiences with that. Similar, I mean, not to quite the same extent as what Mickey Rourke has said about Iron Man
Right.
2. But I think she's had some things about that. But to see her come back in this way, that they're adapting, her becoming Thor and then doing like the whole cancer storyline, I think is going to be really cool.
Hmm.
So yeah, we have that to look forward to. And I'm going to assume that the footage of Jane Foster in Endgame was just like unused footage from the Dark World.
Yeah, and they
I
CGI
think
rocket in
that's
there.
yeah, which makes sense. Um, the post credit scene. You want to talk about that? Or no,
Um,
before we do that, I want to talk about the credit music real quick. We all love Led Zeppelin, the use of Led Zeppelin in Thor Ragnarok. It's great, but for me, the
Foo
original Thor
Fighters.
theme, Foo Fighters Walk, is the definitive Thor theme in my opinion. I mean, I love that song quite a bit. I actually got to see the Foo Fighters live 3 years ago now,
Mm.
and they played that song, and it was great. Um, I posted in my story on Instagram, and I just did a caption #Thor when they were playing Walk, because that's all I think about with that song is it's Thor, it's Thor's theme,
Yeah,
and
and
it's one of those,
it
yeah,
works great in the context of the film too.
hmm yeah, it's a song that's just great for Thor. I mean, it's a song. Me being a Foo Fighters fan, it's a song that was not made specifically for the film. It was legit, like it's the closing track on their Wasting Lights album. But it's a great song. I mean, it came out the same year as Thor, but it works really well in the context of Thor.
Hmm.
It's one of those. There's not a lot of like licensed tracks that are used in the MCU movies. I mean, there's a few. Um, Actually, no, I take that back. There's quite a few now that I think about it. I mean, I'm thinking like the Guardians of the Galaxy
Oh
movies,
yeah.
and eventually, when we'll get to Avengers, Live to Rise, which is one of the rare songs that was made specifically for the MCU.
Right.
It was
I
made by
think that's the only
Soundgarden.
time that that happens.
I mean, there was the Guardians 2 track
All
that was
right.
made, if you want to count that. I think those are the only two instances. And both of them had music videos.
Hmm.
So finally, the post-credit scene of Thor. So we get Eric Selvig, played by Stellan Skarsgård, having a conversation with Nick Fury. And this scene was actually directed by Joss Whedon, who is now trash. um, I'll say more about Joss when we talk about Avengers, because I do have some things to say about him. But for this scene, we basically get introduced to the Tesseract. It's essentially the cosmic cube, but for posers, it's the Tesseract.
Yeah.
So that's, of course, sets up the Avengers, and we also find out that, oh yeah, end of the movie, Loki dies, but it's Loki. He doesn't really die. So it turns out in the post-credit scene, he's alive, and he's manipulating Selvig from what it looks like.
Which he manipulates him again.
In the Avengers once he arrives. So, yeah, pretty good post-credit scene, I would say.
Yeah.
Even though I will admit, at the time, I didn't really know what to make of it.
No, yeah, it's once you get to Avengers, it makes a lot more sense. But it's
yeah, for sure.
It's the weird like ending to the movie where it's like the post-credit scenes before this were like leading to something we all knew what was leading up to, but this one like you didn't you had an idea, but you really didn't know for sure like what this was leading up to.
Yeah.
But
so
you actually found out pretty quickly because Tesseract plays a large role in the next movie.
Yep, and then the movie after that.
Mm-hmm.
And what's even funny is that we didn't mention this in our Iron Man 2 discussion, but when Tony Stark is looking through his father's notes, you do see like drawings of the Tesseract. So it's been building up. So you could say it's been building up for the last 4 films of Phase 1. It was all building towards Tesseract. And the Avengers.
Like poetry, it's sort of a rhyme.
Yes, exactly. Jane Foster, Darcy is a funnier character than we've had before. We can get her working, but they never did. And well, no, I take that back. She works fine in WandaVision.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about Thor?
I think that's it. Can't think of anything else. Yeah.
Cool. What is your grade on this?
Oh, I'm gonna go with a 7.
I am also there with you. A 7 out of 10. Perfectly solid film. Nothing too mind-blowing by any means, but I think it does a really good job at introducing Thor to the uninitiated. Similar, which is a running theme for a lot of the MCU movies. If you're not too familiar with these characters, they do a solid enough job at bringing you up to speed with who they are. I should say for the most part, because there may be a few exceptions to that rule. But that's a discussion for another time. So until then, we'll see you all. Thank you all so much for tuning in for our discussion of Thor and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I guess. We'll try not to bring up Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. too much. I know it's going to come up again when we talk about Avengers. It's unavoidable. And Winter Soldier as well. And it's purely based on what we've seen of the show, which is basically the first 2 seasons. But our next discussion will be on, of course, Captain America, the First Avenger, which I am looking forward to talking about because I like that movie quite a bit. And yeah, until then, we shall see you then. Take care, everybody. Stay safe.